Today on episode number 594, we kind of realized that this year is coming to a close very quickly. So I asked you the question, what do you plan on doing differently in 2018? And you sent me your answers. Hit it, ladies!
The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson.
Podcasting since 2005. I'm your very own personal podcast coach, Dave Jackson. Thanking you so much for tuning in. If you're new to the show, look, I help you massage your message. I help you tackle that technology. I help you face your fears, flatten the learning curve, and get you on the road, not just to podcasting, because look, you can go out, watch some really old, outdated videos from 2012 about podcasting. I'm going to get you podcasting in the right direction. The website is schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code LISTENER, that's LISTENER, when you sign up, and that will save you on either a monthly or yearly subscription. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I asked you the question, what are you going to be doing differently in 2018? And in no particular order, a bunch of you sent in your answers. And I know here in the U.S., we just had Thanksgiving. Mine was awesome. Basically, we do it every year. You eat yourself into a food coma, go into the living room, turn on the TV, watch some bad football, and fall asleep. That is basically Thanksgiving in the Jackson household. Got to spend some time with my great nieces and nephews. It was a great time. And so I'm very thankful to everyone who sent in their answers. And in no particular order, we're going to run through those, and I'll do the typical Dave Jackson thing and throw in a couple different, a little extra here and there. So let's get to it, shall we?
Hi, Dave. This is Abby Nemec from ATimeForHorses.com, home of the storytelling podcast about horses, horse people, and the horse business. I have definitely got a big plan for 2018, and that is that I'm going to keep podcasting. I started my podcast a year ago. When I did, I told all of my friends that I was going to do this for a year, and that if I was still having fun at the end of a year, I would keep going. So guess what? I'm still having fun, and I'm going to keep going. Now, my show requires a lot of research, so my production schedule leaves a little something to be desired, but I really, really love doing it. I am also hoping to become more a part of the podcast community in the coming year. And so that is starting right here, right now, with sending you this little note. Thanks for everything that you and Bernie do for our community, Dave. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Abby. And this is a key point. This is why I love this. If you're having fun, does it really matter if anybody's even listening? If you're having fun, do it. I talked about this on the Ask the Podcast Coach show. I think one of the things that really can bring a podcast down is don't start comparing your show to somebody else, because we're all started at different times. We all have different levels of talent. We all have different resources to use. So if you're having fun, then by all means, keep podcasting.
Hi, Dave Jackson. I am Anna Seawald, the host of the Authentic Moments podcast, which is a show about personal growth in the context of parenting.
Hey, Anna.
What I will be doing differently in 2018. I have planned my entire 2018.
Wow, are you kidding me?
And I'm not kidding.
Wow.
So that's one thing I will be doing differently. I have been podcasting for about 2.5 years, and this is the first time I took some time to plan my entire year.
Failure to plan is planning to fail, right?
Another thing I will be doing differently is I have listened to my audience and I know what kind of shows they like. So I will be doing deep dives into specific topics and sort of create mini training type of episodes.
Well, that is awesome to hear. You're on the right track.
The third thing I will be doing differently this year is I intend on creating a page on my website for potential individuals and guests who constantly pitch me by email or on Facebook to be on my show. I want to create a page that will sort of tell them whether or not they're a good fit or not, because I handpick my guests, and declining people all the time has been taking a lot of time, and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and your sanity.
So I am going to create a simple page that explains who can be a good fit for my show. So thank you so much for asking this question. It helped me to clarify further my intentions for 2018. Wishing you and all the other podcasters lots of luck and success in the 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. You might hear that and go, you know what? That's a good idea. I should probably do that. I really wonder sometimes if even putting up things on your website that said, here's what I'm looking for, because I've had people email me about a podcast that hasn't had an episode out in 3 years saying, I'd like to be a guest. And it's so obvious that they don't read. I don't think they even go to the website. So that might help a little bit. And if it helps a little bit, that because it is kind of a hassle having to tell everybody, no, sorry, no.
Hello, Dave. This is Ben Branham from the Modern Self-Protection Podcast, the podcast dedicated to keeping you safe in today's modern times.
Hey, Ben.
I'm here to answer, what am I going to do different in 2018? Well, first, you've told me a million times, and I'm actually going to do it. I am going to be consistent on my podcast. Most of the time I do it every week, but my podcast is going to go out Tuesday night, 8 p.m. every week from now on. On that, I'm also going to start blogging more. I used to blog about once every time I put out a podcast, but I stopped blogging because I noticed that most of my customers, and I was doing in-person courses, were coming from my podcast. So I decided the podcast is more important, and I kept going with that and kind of dropped the blogging. Well, since then, I've noticed that my download numbers are down. So I'm going back to blogging also, and I think the blog is supporting my podcast. And I don't mean a blog that just has my podcast notes on it or about my podcast that I did, an actual blog that's different than my podcast. My thought is people are finding me through the blog and then finding my podcast and listening to that. So I'm using it as a top-end funnel. And for 2018, that makes me a blogger and a podcaster again. Lastly, I'll be changing my focus on what I sell. I used to sell almost exclusively in-person self-defense courses, and I have a membership area that was an upsell and a support to that. In 2018, I'm going to try to do a bunch of online courses that are cheaper, easier, and then put all that in my membership area and try to use the online courses as a cheap way to get people into my membership area. Thanks, Dave, for your podcasts. I love the School of Podcasting and Logical Losers. I listen to both of them every single week. Really appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, if you're looking for, it sounds like you already have a platform. I use Thinkific. That's Thinkific, schoolofpodcasting.com/Thinkific for the School of Podcasting membership area. But, and blogging, Todd Cochran, Hall of Fame podcaster, the man behind Blueberry, will tell you that he blogs on a regular basis. And I know some people think that the answer to a blog is to transcribe your podcast. Have you ever actually read a transcription? They're not very fun to read. And so a blog can be, you know, for me, I actually have a blog at davidjackson.org, and I don't blog there a ton, but listening to your comment, maybe I should. That's not a bad idea.
Hey, Dave, this is Brad from The Cinema Guys. Can be found at wearethecinemaguys.com.
Hey, Brad.
And also Old Man Brad is my other podcast. But I'm going to focus on The Cinema Guys. And the answer to your question of what are we going to focus on differently in 2018, our big change is going to be working on consistency for our show. We're in our second year, and consistency with us has been a problem. So we're going to work on scheduling and getting more consistent with myself and two other co-hosts getting together to talk about movies and TV. It's a little tough getting the three of us together all the time. So we are going to move to an every other week show with some added content to it so that our listeners aren't missing out because we're moving, skipping a week. But that's the big thing we are going to work on in 2018.
Cool.
Love the show. Thank you. Once again, we can be found at wearethecinemagays.com.
Thank you, Brad. And really, in the end, the reason we always preach consistency is if you can become consistent, then you can become part of your audience's routine. And in the end, you can only do as many shows as you can do. I mean, you've got 3 people's schedules to juggle. Don't feel bad if it's hard to get everybody together. And if you're doing it as a hobby, which, 99.9% of us are, you do what you can. You do the best show you can and do your best to interact with your audience and take it from there. There are all sorts of things that can affect your schedule. I was in Nashville this year at Big Podcast, and somebody came up to me and said, yeah, I had to kind of put my podcast on the back burner. And I was like, oh, what happened? He's like, oh, my wife had cancer. And I'm like, absolutely, you put your podcast on the back burner when your wife has cancer. So you do what you can. And, I always say if you're just starting out, record a couple episodes, then you can figure out what your schedule is going to be, because you need a schedule that's going to allow you to keep your sanity and hair.
Hi, Dave. I'm Bryan Ensminger. I'm the host of the Engaging Missions show, where I interview missionaries and church planters about their experiences and their stories. When I think about next year and things that I might change for my show, and none of this is set in stone yet, it's still stuff that I'm considering, but there are a couple of things that stand out. First, I'm considering going from a weekly publishing schedule to twice a month. It's something I've been thinking about for a while because I've been kind of dancing on the edge of burnout, and I don't feel like I'm really doing as good a job as I could if I was a little bit more focused. I've been really trying to push through for some time, but when I was at the big podcast event in Nashville, Tennessee, I remember Rick talking about how a lot of things changed for him when he started publishing twice a month rather than once a week. And so I'm thinking about, considering changing to that and seeing how that works out. It'll just be an experiment. And my hope is that when I do that, then I can change something else about my show, because I don't feel like I've done a great job of interacting not only with my guests, but also with my audience. So my hope is that by moving toward a twice a month publishing schedule rather than every week, that I'll have time to put together a higher quality show. I'll be able to focus more on connecting with and interacting with my audience and with the guests and creating better connections there. And also maybe be able to market a little bit more, which of course part of that's going to be interacting with my audience and with my guests. And my personal hope is that out of this, I'll feel a stronger connection and that I'll actually receive back some of that energy that I need to continue on, because honestly, I have been kind of sitting on the edge right now, and I've been struggling. And these are things that I'm thinking about because I want to continue this. I really think it's a valuable thing that I'm doing. I love podcasting and I want to keep loving it. So these are things that I'm considering changing. Dave, thank you so much for what you do for the School of Podcasting. Love the show. Love what you're doing. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Bryan. And here again, somebody saying, look, I'm really getting crispy here. You've got to do what you got to do, because it's kind of like the old airplane thing. You have to take care of yourself first before you take care of your children. And if you don't take care of you first, then there's not going to be a podcast, because we need you to make the podcast. In the same way that a child needs the parent, a podcast needs you to make the podcast. So it doesn't do any good to put out, a weekly or twice a week or whatever schedule you've picked that's just not going to work. If you burn yourself out, then you're going to find yourself going, it's time to make the podcast. And that's not good.
Hello, Dave Jackson. This is Clay Groves, the Chief Executive Fish Nerd of the Fish Nerds podcast. And you asked the question, what will I be doing with my podcast that's different in 2018? And that's a tough question because I fear change.
Uh-oh.
But I'm just kidding. I actually really enjoy change and trying new things. I think in 2018, I'm going to start running the podcast more like a business. And that means trying to find a way to make some money on it. I have no trouble getting attention. I get to talk in front of people. I get to go on trips. I get all kinds of great interviews and great guests. And it seems like everybody makes money off of my podcast except me. So I think in 2018, I'm going to be more deliberate about making money, which could mean selling ad space or maybe doing paid appearances. I get asked to appear at retail outlets all the time, and they put my logo in their advertisements, and I think they're making a lot of money off of my name. So I think I might start saying, hey, you guys, maybe you pay me a little bit of money to come down there and make an appearance. So I think deliberate money making on the podcast. I do make some money through Patreon right now, but I think I'd like to make enough money to really maybe take my wife out for dinner would be really nice. Besides just covering my bills. Anyway, Dave, thanks for making the show you make. I enjoy School Podcast and Podcast Rodeo and all the stuff you do. And Happy New Year. This is Clay from the Fish Nerds Podcast.
Thank you, Clay. I met him at Podcast Mid-Atlantic. Really nice guy. Also, he's been reviewed on the Podcast Review Show. And I'm telling you, nothing tastes better than when your wife goes, you're spending too much time podcasting, and you go, hey, you know that steak that you're eating right now, since we're at, I don't know, Longhorn? Yeah, that's courtesy of the podcast. That, but keep in mind, family over everything. But yeah, and also I should say, you don't have to make money with your podcast, but if you want to, I like your idea. I mean, that's how DJs in radio make money. You don't make squat being on the radio in most cases, but you do get paid for those, hey, I'm going to be at the grand opening of the Piggly Wiggly in, Poughkeepsie. That's how you make money sometimes when you're in radio. And like you said, if you're bringing in people to meet you, that's a value, and you should get paid for that. How much? I have no clue. I would go ask Erik K. Johnson, podcast talent coach guy, because he's in radio. He might have some clue on how much those guys are getting paid for personal appearances.
Hi, Dave. My name is Danielle. I have a podcast called Everybody's National Parks. My website is everybody'snationalparks.com, and the podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Stitcher. And what I'm going to be doing differently in 2018, I met you a couple of weeks ago in November at DC Podfest. That was my first time meeting other podcasters and getting to learn and help improve my podcasting. So I learned so much from you and others. And what I'm going to be doing differently, I've been focused on producing good content, and I'm very happy with what I've produced. But I haven't been as focused on growing my audience, and so that is what I'm going to be doing. By way of finding partners and cross promotion, and also perhaps looking for sponsors as well. So that is what I'm going to be focused on in the coming year, is growing my audience through partnerships. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Danielle. I'm going to give you a link, schoolofpodcasting.com/Glenn. That's Glenn and the number 1. That is my good buddy, Glenn the Geek Hubert, who runs the Horse Radio Network. And that Glenn's been on here 3 times. So if you go to Glenn, that's 2 N's, 1, then Glenn 2, and then /Glenn 3, you'll hear all 3 interviews. But the first one is where he talks about partnering with different sponsors, that if you're a sponsor on your show, you don't just give them money, you actually help promote the show. And that's a great strategy. And it was great meeting you at DC Podfest.
Hey, Dave, it's Erik K. Johnson, the podcast talent coach. You can find me over at podcasttalentcoach.com.
We were just talking about you.
I do 2 podcasts right now. I do Podcast Talent Coach. You can find that in iTunes, Stitcher, and all the other podcatchers. And I also do the Podcast Review Show with the esteemed Dave Jackson. Find that at podcastreviewshow.com. In 2018, the one thing that I'm going to do, that I'm going to focus most of my time on, is implementing the 80-20 rule. Rather than going in 127 different directions, I'm going to find the few activities, the 20% of my activities that drive 80% of the results, and I'm going to focus most of my time on that 20% so I can really start to move the needle in 2018. That's my goal and my plan anyway. We'll see if it actually works out. Find me over at podcasttalentcoach.com. It's Erik K. Johnson, the podcast talent coach. And Dave, have a great 2018.
Danielle, you were talking about making your content better. You have to go listen to Podcast Talent Coach. Seriously, it's an awesome podcast. Erik is he's really a guru when it comes to creating engaging content. And it's a blast doing the podcast review with him, because I can sit there and take notes the whole time. He's a guy that not only is in radio, but has taken stations to number one and then kept them there. So check it out, podcasttalentcoach.com. And if you want myself and Erik to review your show, and I don't mean just listen to the beginning of it like I do on Podcast Rodeo Show. We go over from top to bottom, the technology, the flow, your website, the graphics, everything. Check it out, podcastreviewshow.com.
Hi, Dave. This is Kim from Toastmasters 101.
Hey, Kim.
I can be found at toastmasters101.net. You asked what I'm doing different this year.
Yep.
Everything.
Oh, boy.
I'm doing everything different. You see, Toastmasters changed everything this past year. They've changed their entire education program. So everything I've done in the past is quickly becoming obsolete. That means I have to update my website. I have to update all my content, and I have to update how I do things. It's going to be a challenging, exciting year, and I'm really glad that I've got the School of Podcasting to fall back on when those moments of change get challenging. Thanks a lot, Dave.
Thank you, Kim. Yes, Kim is a member of the School of Podcasting, also a regular ongoer, part contributor, part she helps me run. That's an easier way to say that. Yes, I'm talking about Kim, Bernie. Yeah, Bernie's like, well, okay, what are you going to do different in 2018 since you're being so noisy? Okay, you're going to promote your show more? A little more consistency? You're going to be nicer to your producer? Can you guys hear this? He's literally out in the hallway. It's ridiculous. I got to close the door if you're going to be that loud. You know that, right? Yeah. Oh, jeez. Anyway, Kim helps run the Northeast Ohio Podcasters Meetup at neohiopodcasters.com. We meet the third Monday of every month.
Hi, Dave. This is Kit Parks with the Active Travel Adventures podcast, where I curate multi-day adventure travel for fit folks. The thing I'd like to do better in 2018 is to hire a VA to help me with the tasks that I'm not very good at and or don't like. I just launched at the end of September, so I'm still rather new at all this and figured I needed to learn how to do it before I could actually hire somebody to do some of these tasks for me. So the hope is that the VA will do a better job than I'm certainly doing, and I'll get some of that time back. I had no idea how time-consuming this podcasting gig was. Anyhow, thanks for all the good work you do.
Kit, thank you so much. Can I tell you that I can hear your smile through your audio? You just sound very bubbly and fun. I have a book for you. I've yet to read this. I have had this recommended to me multiple times. Chris Ducker has a book called Virtual Freedom, How to Work with a Virtual Staff to Buy More Time, Become More Productive, and Build Your Dream Business. So if you're new to that whole VA thing, that might be a question of the month in the future. Maybe we'll ask people tips on how to work with a VA, because I know Daniel J. Lewis has a VA, a couple other people that have said, look, I need time with my family, and I'm either going to spend time or money. So they spend money to get more time with things that are more important. So thanks for sending that in, and good luck in 2018.
Hey, Dave, this is Landen from CallingAllPlatforms.com, co-host of the Calling All Platforms Tech Podcast.
Hey, Landen.
Something that we want to do differently in 2018 is be a little more engaging with our audience. We've tried doing this in the past via social media, and it hasn't worked out as well as we had hoped. And something that we talk a little bit about on our podcast has to do with gaming. And one way we want to try and involve our listeners a little more is by hosting some gaming parties, whether it be just getting together with local people and having fun, or do a mini tournament, whether it's local or online. We think that this can be a better way for our listeners to get to know us, and even more so for us to get to know them. And by doing so, we can provide better content for them, and knowing what they want to hear and what games they're playing and having fun with. So I think that it will be good for us, because not only will we be having fun with our listeners and getting to know them better, but being able to provide better content for them. And I just want to thank you, Dave, for all that you do and all the content that you provide us as podcasters so we can get better at what we do. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Landen. One of the things that I've done in the past, and a lot of people have done, like Katie Krimitsos and Natalie Ekdahl from Biz Chicks, that's with an X, they both have really engaged Facebook groups. So does Jennifer Kupferman and Elsie Escobar. They have a really engaged Facebook group. So it's a way to kind of keep the conversation going after the podcast. If you're looking for a way to interact with your audience I'm usually not a fan of putting something on another platform that you have no control over, because realize Facebook could wake up tomorrow and go, hey, guess what? We killed groups. But right now, I just know there are a lot of people. Now, it's not one of those things that if you just make a group, people go in there and just start babbling away. You kind of have to stoke the fire. But if you're looking to engage your audience, and I love the fact that most of your engagement's going to be, you're going to try some things in person, you're going to try some things online. And that's really the key. Just keep trying things, and eventually something will work.
My name is Randy Cantrel. I am with leaningtowardwisdom.com.
Awesome.
2018, the differences for me are not really going to include my own podcast, but co-hosting a couple of other podcasts. And these are going to be interview-based. So these are two huge changes for me. One, I have always worked solo. And number two, I haven't done interviews. Well, I've done a few, but I've not done an interview-based podcast. So being a co-host and doing interview-based podcasts are going to be two monumental changes for me in 2018.
Very cool. Randy, you can find him at growgreat.com. And what's wild about that is Randy has a couple of really great shows, and they always, to me, that's almost like mental floss for me. It always kind of gets me working in my head, and it helps me then in some cases work on those things that I need to work on. So it's kind of fun now to watch Randy, who's going to have to push himself out of his comfort zone to try new things in 2018. And that's the way we grow, by trying new things.
Hey, Dave Jackson, Scott Johnson here from the Computer Tutor podcast. On my podcast every Monday morning, I show people how to do cool things with their computer. And that's at computertutorflorida.com.
Love it.
Guess what I'm going to be doing differently in 2018 for my podcast? And, I might change a few things here or there, but definitely the biggest thing I'll be doing for the first time is I'll be attending an annual podcasting event. I'll be at PodFest in Orlando in February. And, I hear about these things all the time on your show and on some other shows, and people talk about how great they are, but I never really thought about actually attending one. But almost a year ago, I started going to the local meetings here in the Tampa Bay area for the Florida Podcasters Association, which, as you know, is put on by Chris Krimitsos. And they're pretty amazing. And since Chris and his team are also the masterminds behind PodFest, I know it has to be an incredible time. Not to mention the fact that everyone that talks about PodFest just raves about how great it is. So I'm looking forward to being there and seeing you, as well as a bunch of other podcasters that I listen to regularly. So I'll see you in Orlando.
That will be great fun. It was kind of interesting as I was watching, as we've been kind of going through these clips. Erik K. Johnson, I met at an event. Clay from Fish Nerds, I've met at an event. Of course, I also know him from the Podcast Review Show. I know Abby from the Podcast Review Show. Most of these clips are coming in from people, not all of them, but many of them are coming in from people that I've met at events. So it's always fun. I think you're going to find that you will walk away from any event you go to, whether it be PodFest in February. I'm going to be speaking at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego. That's at the end of February. I'll be at PodCon in Seattle on December 9th and 10th. Looking forward to that. That's a new event. And here's half the reason why I'm really excited about PodCon is I look at the list of speakers. I don't know anybody. There's like 2 people. I know Drew from Sleep With Me, who's been on this show, and Roman Mars. Other than that, I don't recognize that. And that doesn't mean those are not good speakers. It means they're out of my bubble. So I'm really looking forward to that. And we actually have big news for PodFest. PodFest is February 8th through the 10th. February 8th is my 53rd birthday. I'm old! And we have a big announcement. That's right. They're doing something different at PodFest this year. It will be the first ever roast of Dave Jackson. Man, talk about getting out of your comfort zone. This should be interesting. I've never been roasted before, and I understand that if needed, Chris will supply funds for therapy after Glenn the Geek, Jessica Gufferman, and Joe from Stacking Benjamins all rip me to shreds. And more info on that as it unveils. But meanwhile, back at the episode.
Hello, Dave. Hello, School of Podcast listeners. This is Seth, a.k.a. Zandrax of GeekvilleRadio.com, TWBpodcast.com, and ClassicWrestlingMemories.com. Yes, that's 3 separate websites right there. And what I plan to do differently in 2018 is to get more aggressive with getting my shows out there. I'm comfortable behind the mic, and I genuinely believe my shows are entertaining. I just don't have the numbers that I'd like. One of the things I have to fix is I'm basically a one-man show. I record, edit, and do all the show notes, which takes a lot of time. And we're talking 3 different sites and about 4 or 5 different shows. And if I could have somebody else do show notes, it would definitely free up time. For the record, I currently take part in 5 different shows. Geekville Radio, as the name implies, is all about geek-oriented stuff, sci-fi, comic books. Other Geekville branded shows are Examining the Doctor, where I and my co-host Mark give commentary tracks for episodes of Doctor Who. And then there's Examining the Dead, which is a horror-themed podcast talking old classic horror as well as modern stuff like Walking Dead and Z Nation. Over in the pro wrestling world, I have the Wrestling Brethren podcast, and that's available at TWB Podcast. And then there's Classic Wrestling Memories at ClassicWrestlingMemories.com, which again, as the name implies, talks old school wrestling, some of the black and white TV stuff. But that's it, short and sweet. If I can divvy up the show notes and maybe have some help with editing, it would get me time to get the word out on the show more. So thank you, Dave, for playing this, and I look forward to 2018. And I hope everybody there in the School of Podcasting has a great day, has a great holiday, and we'll see what the future holds.
In terms of managing that many websites, check out Manage WP. I'll have links to this out at schoolofpodcasting.com/594. And yeah, you've got your hands full, my friend. Holy cow.
Hello, Dave. Todd McCann from the Trucker Dump podcast over at abouttruckdriving.com. This is a show for anyone interested in trucking or the trucking lifestyle, not just truckers. As the tagline says,
welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry. And pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you.
Yep, it's that kind of podcast. Well, you were asking what we're going to try to do differently in 2018, and my whole goal is just to try to get the word out to truckers that podcasts actually exist. You know, Glenn the Geek and I, we share something in common, I think. We both have very non-tech savvy audiences. You know, a couple of months ago, I got some business cards for the podcast, and I decided I was going to just start approaching truckers at truck stops and telling them about the podcast. Now, Dave, you were right about this. It is a little weird just approaching someone out of the blue, like your mall episode. But I got used to it eventually. Well, what would happen is about half the time they had never even heard of a podcast, and they never even heard the term, and they'd look at me like I've got a porcupine crawling out of my nose or something. Maybe 3 out of 10 times they've actually heard the term podcast, but they don't really know what one is. Maybe twice out of 10 times they've heard the term, they know what one is, but they just don't listen. I'd say maybe out of 100 drivers I talk to, maybe 2 or 3 of them actually listen to podcasts on a regular basis. So you can see that I've got my hands full here. This really shouldn't surprise me, though, because you'd be shocked how many truckers out here still have flip phones. I talked to one the other day who had never even heard the word blog. Amazing. But, you know, truckers have never been accused of being real bright. But, you know, they are the perfect audience for podcasts. I mean, first off, they've got 11 hours of driving per day with nothing to do but waste time. Well, pay attention to the road, obviously. But, you know, we got to waste some time. And we can download these podcasts at home or when we get free Wi-Fi, and we can listen whenever we want. It's exactly what podcasts were made for. But it just kills me that truckers have no idea how much good content there is out there. So the thing I'm going to do different in 2018 is I'm going to try to spread the word as best I can. That's my whole goal. My first thought was to go on every trucking podcast, but, well, you can see the flaw in that, right? So I've decided to just submit articles to every print and online trucking publication there is, and hopefully get the word out to truckers who are still reading old-fashioned print magazines. I guess I don't have any other ideas. Dave, if you or your listeners have suggestions for me, I would love to hear your suggestions. You can email me at truckerdump@gmail.com. Well, Dave, thanks for the show. It always keeps me motivated, even when these truckers are letting me down. So anyway, I'll leave you like I leave all of my listeners. Drive safe and stay out of my way.
Todd, you can always direct people to learntosubscribe.com. Learntosubscribe.com will show people how to subscribe to a podcast. Now, there's not much there for Android, but this is where you could do something like Gun the Geek did on Horse Radio Network. You could go to abouttruckdriving.com and just have a big old button to say new to podcasting, and then have directions with screenshots on how to subscribe via iOS, via Android. And there's not much you can do for a flip phone person, but you're going to have to be the educator, and then, just maybe put that on the back of the business card. If you're new to podcasting, go to abouttruckdriving.com/learn or something like that. So the bad news is, your audience doesn't know about podcasting, but the good news is, they're probably, like you said, they're prime candidates to be podcast listeners. It's just up to awesome people like you to hold their hand and get them to listen.
Hey, Dave. This is Darwyn Dave from the Dealing with My Grief podcast at dealingwithmygrief.com. And you asked what we're going to do differently in 2018. For me, I'm going to open up my show to other people. I've been podcasting now for almost 2 years. I started in January 2016. And for the most part, it's been a solo show. I simply chronicle my grief recovery process from the time that I was 10 when I lost my father to now at the age of, a 50-year-old man. And it's primarily been about my experiences and my feelings and certain things that I either would or would not change about myself, or some things I may or may not have wanted to know at different stages of my life in my grief recovery process. Well, I've decided to open that up and to interview other people and to incorporate their stories as part of the show. In one of my episodes, I did in fact interview one gentleman who was doing a study on grief dreams, and that was pretty much it. And I decided I was going to sort of shy away from interviews for a while, specifically because some of the information I might want to know about the loss they've experienced, questions I might ask might be too personal or may come off insensitive. So I had to try to figure out in my mind a way to do that, to get the decent content and the information that I wanted, but not to seem that I was intruding on somebody's personal space as it relates to their grief and their loved ones. However, I'm not going to wait till 2018. I've already started to contact folks who have agreed to share their stories with me, one of which actually has been my mother, and that's the one person I'm looking at interviewing the most. We're probably going to make that happen around a Thanksgiving holiday. And there's some other people I've got in the pipe that we're going to get on and schedule soon. So I'm going to take your advice when it comes to starting a podcast and not wait, do it now. So as far as the interviews, I'm not going to wait to 2018. I'm actually going to start doing that as soon as possible. Thanks again for everything you do for the podcasting community, Dave. I greatly appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you at DC Podfest in early November. Take care. Talk to you later. Bye.
I actually did get to hang out with Darwyn in DC. It was awesome to meet him. And this just shows again that your podcast is not a statue. It's a recipe, and you can do with it whatever you want and mix it up. And if it doesn't work, you just go back to the way it was.
Hi, Dave. It's Win. My podcast is butterfliesofwisdom.com. It teaches people about disabilities and solo entrepreneurship. And it's an interview show, but in 2018, I'm actually going to be more transparent with my fans because I'm starting a new podcast called Ask Win. Ask Win is going to be a fan-based podcast asking me anything about disabilities or writing books or just general life stuff, and I'll answer those questions. So that's what I'm doing in 2018. Again, this is Win from Butterflies of Wisdom, and my podcast could be found at Butterflies of Wisdom in iTunes and in Stitcher and all those good places. Thanks, Dave. Bye.
Bye, Win. Now be careful with this, because when you build a podcast that is based on audience feedback, I tried that once and it failed miserably because when you first start a podcast, you have no audience. So that might work, but just know ahead of time that could be a bit of a rude awakening. And so you might want to work on, growing an email list. I know you already have a podcast, but just realize when you base a podcast solely on feedback from your audience, that could be a real uphill battle.
Hey, Dave Jackson, the Dave Jackson. This is Zack Demopoulos, host of the Raising Rents, as in Parents podcast. And that's a show that helps you care for an aging parent. What I'm going to do different in 2018 is I am going to do more public service announcement marketing about how to find and listen to podcasts. Probably one of the obvious reasons why I'm doing that is to help increase my listening base from a group of people who have no idea what a podcast is and can probably benefit from my podcast. But probably the bigger reason why I want to do that is I am still amazed to this day how many people I talk to about podcasting or podcasts, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. They don't even know what a podcast is. They don't know how to find one, and they definitely don't know how to listen to one. And I just feel like it's my responsibility to help people in my age group, maybe my demographics, just have access to this amazing invention. I don't know how better way to describe that. And I'm probably going to shoot for the 35, 45, 55, 65 age group. And that is the listening demographics of my target audience. So it will, again, like I said, help me with my podcast, but I just really want more people to listen to podcasts. It's just too great of a thing for them to not be able to access it. And it's going to help all of us, but it really is going to help the listener. There's just so much out there, and there's some good stuff. And I think that's what I want to do in 2018. Just got to think about how I'm going to do it and what that's going to look like. Anybody has any tips or ideas? Let me know. Thanks again, Dave, for what you do and for always asking.
Thank you, Zack. Another guy I got to hang out with at MapCon. Always good to see Zack. And here's a couple things I was thinking of. I know the public library has different kind of events. You might want to contact them and say, hey, I'd like to hold a 30-minute presentation on how to subscribe to a podcast. I'm actually thought about this. Apple, if you have an Apple store, would be interesting to see. Because again, all they can say is no. And say, hey, I'd like to make a thing, set up a little table, and I'm going to have some handouts on how to subscribe to a podcast. Another store that's trying to be seen as a technical store, kind of the new Radio Shack, is Verizon. I'd not been in Verizon in a while, and they're selling everything in there now. It's not just phones. It's like powered speakers and obviously tablets and phones, but all sorts of little, they're drones and anything. They're kind of like a new technology store. And I think I would try there before I would try a Best Buy. They're a little more intimate in a Verizon. So just think of where do geeky people hang out? And then obviously it's a matter of going where your audience is. So that would be, the fun thing about doing something at like a library or a Verizon store or a T-Mobile or whatever it is you're going to get a wide variety of people. So those people may not be your target audience. But again, if we can just get everybody to tell their friend, hey, do you listen to podcasts? And then show them how to subscribe, that would be huge. There's a huge market for that on the Android side, especially. We've all been talking about iTunes and Apple podcasts for years. We need to go back and refocus on the Android people. And that leads to me. What am I going to be doing differently in 2018? Well, like some of the people we heard to today, I have too many podcasts. I have literally, let's go down the list. We have School of Podcasting. We have Ask the Podcast Coach. We have the Podcast Rodeo Show. We have the Logical Weight Loss Podcast. And then we have other ones that I do on occasion. We have things like the Bernie the Cat Show. And we have Building a Better Dave. I have another show, Feeding My Faith. And that may come back, but I doubt it. It's not a lack of passion. It's just, and it's sad to say in a way, it's just not something, I don't know, that show was going to be a couple different things, and I never found my voice That's a good way of putting it in that show. And so I've moved. I also do the Alexa Cast. I don't think the Alexa Cast is going to make it to the end of 2018. This is a show I started. It was a journey podcast. You got to listen to me kind of learn how to use my Alexa. It is changing already. It's already becoming a much shorter show because there's just not much content. The way that Amazon organizes skills, there's no way to kind of see what's new, and the skills that do come out are just, hey, here's the 37 app that allows you to make rain noises. That's fun. So that may or may not make it to 2018, but my goal is to cut back on some of these so I can see things like the Alexa Cast maybe going away. Bernie the Cat Show has always been a joke, but the Logical Weight Loss Podcast is something, and I'm really starting to have a hard time finding content for that. I did start a Facebook group to help remedy that situation. Hasn't really helped a whole lot, and it's just something that my goal this year is to really hunker down and lose weight so I can hit my target goal and say, see you bye, it's been fun, and then leave. So not that I don't like doing that show. It's just getting harder and harder to find creative ways to say, back away from the Twinkie and step on a treadmill. So, and then much like you, I want to find a way to interact with my audience. That's why I'm going to all these different events, really. And I'm trying to find ways to get out, because to me, especially if you can find things locally where you can meet with people face to face is the best way to make a connection. And then from there, it's voice to voice over Skype or however you're going to do it, different online meetings. And then from there, it's email. And the idea is to get more people to know who I am, know what I do, and know about my podcast. And really, that's kind of about all you can do. And I'm looking forward to the Podcasting in 6 Weeks class that starts in January. That's going to be a really small class. So if you're interested in that, this is where we're going to meet every Saturday. And by the end of February, you'll have a show that has been well planned. You'll have the right equipment. You will have, the best sounding podcast based on your budget. And you're going to be in all the major podcast directories. And if you're interested in that, go over to podcastingin6weeks.com. If you'd rather learn how to podcast on your own time, your own speed, still got the School of Podcasting. Just go over to schoolofpodcasting.com/start. But I'm looking to also up my game on social media. Like, I really don't have an Instagram account because when I signed up, there was a problem with my email and I've never gone back and fixed it. I want to get more involved on Twitter, Facebook, because much like some of you mentioned, I spend a lot of time on content creation. I don't spend enough time on promotion. So my goal, to kind of summarize me, cut back on some of the podcasts I do so I can increase the value in the fewer podcasts that I create, then spend more time on promoting the show. And then for me, one of my favorite things is really getting to know people. And that's one of the reasons why I started Podcasting in 6 Weeks, because I really enjoyed when I did that in the past. And so when I was divorced and had more time on my hands, I thought, one of the things I want to bring back is Podcasting in 6 Weeks, because it is more personalized. Not that you're not personalized when you join the School of Podcasting, but this literally is face-to-face over the internet. And I still talk to the people that were in the previous classes. From time to time, they will check in and let me know how things are going. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Cutting back and focus. I think those are going to be the two big things for that. I do have, and that's really, if we think about this, it's easy to be in my boat, because here's what I'm thinking right now. Okay, I want to redo the website. That was one of the goals of 2017. I want to do an updated version of More Podcast Money. That's a book I wrote, and then put it out as an audiobook, which only makes sense since it's for podcasters. Can't believe I didn't do that the first time. Those are some of my goals that are going on as well. And then I looked at things that I did this year that kind of took me down a rabbit hole that in the end I'm not going to do anymore. And one of those is I went over and tested Whooshka, which is a free podcast media hosting. And no, I typically don't recommend free podcast media hosting, because I'm going to give them about 16 months and they'll go out of business because, well, free is a horrible business model. I tried Pinecast because originally they were almost free. What else did I try? Omni Studio, which is now only focusing on networks. So I spent a lot of time investigating things that I'm not going to recommend. And I know you might be saying, but Dave, how do you know if you're going to be able to recommend it or not if you don't try it? And for me, I think I'm not going to say I'm not going to look at other podcast media hosts, but I have 4 that I recommend: Libsyn, Blueberry, Spreaker, and Podbean. Those are now some I recommend more than others. I mean, my top 2 are I work for Libsyn, full disclosure, but I was a customer for 10 years before I was an employee. But Libsyn's my primary one. Blueberry's good as well, and they got great people over there. Use the coupon code SOPFREE on any of those, and you'll get a free month. But I'm not going to spend time looking at podcast platforms that I don't think really have a chance of me going, oh yeah, this is new. They're doing something different, and et cetera, et cetera. And Awsound was another one that I played some time in. And Mark's a great guy over there. Nothing wrong with those guys. But I've got my recommendations, and I don't see anybody coming up with something because the companies I'm recommending have years in podcasting. And things like Pinecast, I asked him if he was going to be AIB compliant. And he was like, well, I deduplicate. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you don't get it. I said, are you going to have the new iTunes tags where you have the episode numbers? He goes, oh, that's only for shows that are serial. Well, that's wrong. So it's obvious that the person at Pinecast doesn't really do all of his homework. He's probably a great programmer and he's got the back end set up, but he doesn't really know podcasting. And so I don't think I'm going to be doing that anymore, because that typically is the effect that I end up with is, yep, there's somebody that I'm not going to recommend. So that is something else I'm not going to be doing in the future, at least to that depth of a level where I was really diving in and things like that, because there are other things I could have been looking into that would have been much more valuable to you. And in the end, that's the bottom line, is I want to look at things and test things that might benefit you. And so, I mean, let's say one of those was good. Let's say Pinecast was good. I'd say, okay, well, now it's Libsyn, Blueberry, Spreaker, Podbean, and Pinecast, and so-and-so. Well, that's too many choices, because in the end, I'm just going to go, I just go with Libsyn. I just go with Blueberry. It's too many choices. So that is something I'm not going to be doing. So I'm looking at, what worked and what didn't work. And this is a good time of the year as we wrap things up to go back and look at your stats. I know you're like, what? Because I'm always like, don't obsess over your stats. But go ahead. Most cases, you can export these and do some sorting. Find out what were the more popular episodes this year. Find out the ones that, for whatever reason, didn't really make the downloads go. And look at what the topics were. Were these interviews? Were these solo shows? If you're a person that's trying to be seen as an expert, I would ditch the interview thing and start doing more solo shows. Just take some time and look at what worked, what didn't work. Look at why you're podcasting, because that might change from year to year. And then look at your content. Is your content going to steer your audience in a direction where you want them to go? And so that your goals are met and their goals are met. They're getting great content and they are helping you achieve your goals, whatever that may be. So thanks to everybody that chimed in. I'm deeply, deeply appreciative of that. It's humbling when you throw that out, because there's a really good chance. I always think I could be going to you going, well, this was the one I talked about and nobody said anything in, and people did. And I'm deeply, deeply appreciative of that. There is still one question that we're going to be doing later in 2018. I need this by January 1st, 2018. And this is for episode number 600. Which will be out on January 8th. And I always break kind of the format on the hundreds, on the episode 400, episode 500, things like that. And so we're going to do what's called an AMA, Ask Me Anything. And so I'm saying, and you can email me, dave@schoolofpodcasting.com. If you want to record your question, that would be awesome. And just email it to me, dave@schoolofpodcasting.com. And you can ask me anything except podcasting. So it's going to kind of be, let's get to know Dave a little bit. Anything you ever want to know about Dave, let me know. Email it to me by January 1st, 2018, and just put in the subject line, AMA 600 or something like that. And I will already have a folder made for those as those come in. So that'll be the next kind of interactive episode that we do. So thanks so much for tuning in, and hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving in the U.S. Have a safe and happy New Year kind of as we go forward with the holidays and everything like that. Be safe. It gets a little crazy out there. I went out shopping Black Friday, and hoofa, it's nuts out there. So be careful. And remember, family over everything. Family over everything about this time of year. And that's really, for me at least, that's I get a huge amount of pleasure of hanging out with great nieces and nephews and my brother and my sister and things like that. So podcasting is important. You know, if it's a hobby and it can bring you a lot of joy, but in the end, family over everything. That's my advice to you. So thank you so much for tuning in. And until next week, class is dismissed. Take care and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Power of Podcasting Network. Find it at powerofpodcasting.com. Changing the world, one download at a time.